on down. Maybe let's just join these chairs. How about the cast? I see Charlie. I see Matthew. I see a man named Hugh. Michelle. Oh my goodness. Where do we begin? Guys, congratulations. It is a wonderful film. It was a joy to watch. And now let's just tear into it. The auteur himself is to my right. I'd like to start just talking about the process for coming up with this type of a story. So my favorite of your works are when you have complete control and you're writing and directing as you are now. So tell me about where a story like this comes from. Is there always like a kernel of an idea? Is there a bit of truth? Is there a bit of history in your own life? Or is it all out of the cranium?
I think it's all of the above, actually. But it's anything there's various things, particularly with, I suppose, within an English culture, that stimulate you. And there are contradictions and paradoxes, and they stimulate you. And when you find this, I'm not anti the class system, incidentally, because there's weird things that happen within it. And you can look at it as a negative thing. But if you don't look at it as a negative thing, interesting things happen. And it's the contradictions and the paradoxes of how those two worlds meet. Somehow the middle class, we all sort of aspire to be the middle class, but somehow the most interesting aspect of class is the upper echelons and the lower echelons, because that's where all the interesting stuff happen. And I suppose that's what I find stimulating about narrative is trying to reconcile the vortex in between those disparities, because ultimately what we're after is some kind of equilibrium, but you can have a lot of fun trying to find that equilibrium. So I think I'm principally inspired by contrast and things that should sit uncomfortably with us, but I think we need to go on that journey. And I think on that journey of trying to reconcile these disparate parts, you have a lot of fun. And I think if you don't have fun, you're not going to have any fun at all.
And so there's so many little nuggets and details within your films, whether it's your business, Michelle, or just your business, Matthew, which is a very different business, but both very profitable, it seems like, from the film. In terms of coming up with the granular nature of the texture of the film, is that your own personal experiences, or just your again, kind of your imagination? You don't have to answer that.
Sorry, that was me.
Yeah, I'm going back to you. I'm going to go right after this. I'm going down the line. Next question from Matthew. Next question from Charlie. Is where everybody's going to play. It's going to be fun.
Yes. No, I just feel as though I'm going to repeat myself. That's the only problem with answering that question, is it feels like a repetition of the first one.
You can veto any question out of my mouth that doesn't hit your standard. You can say, Tim, that's really not up to my standards. So it's time for Matthew's question.
Time for Matthew's question.
All right, here we go. Matthew. I had two questions for you, and one of them was a little bit convoluted, and I feel might be lost in translation. So I'm going to go straight into like the easier question, and so I'm thinking about Beach Bum, and I'm going into this movie. I want you to maybe talk about what's your relationship with weed, and is that a factor in deciding your thespian roles? And same rules apply.
That's a straightforward
Shitty question, pass the mic.
No, great question. I don't know how good my answer will be. Beach Bum and The Gentleman, what's my relationship with weed? And do I make my choices as a thespian based on that? I don't know, I guess I gave a good answer.
And by the way, your whiskey, by the way, Long Branch, is very lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Been unapologetically, shamelessly plugging it all day long. I don't really think about weed when I'm making a choice for a role. Yeah, so Beach Bum was a partaker, a consumer of weed and everything else. This role was the heavy. He was the businessman. He's been making a living on it, and he's not one that even takes from his own stash. A little bit of what Guy was talking about. He's an American who's come over to sell England to the English. And it's very true, you know, sometimes when people come from outside of our homeland, or even our homes or where we live, they can point something out that's really interesting, or find an angle with how to make things work that we wouldn't notice because we live there. And that's what Mickey did. Yeah, he doesn't take from his own stash. And to go back on the Beach Bum, yeah, I got asked today, did y'all get high on set? And I said, no. And they said, well, you did on Beach Bum. I said, well, yeah, but that was the story of Snoop. And I got Snoop. No, on this one, not that I know of. That's about as much as I've taken.
That's a totally acceptable
for my
answer.
choices.
And so, just so you know, there's a more cerebral question coming down the pike for you down the road.
That wasn't the cerebral.
No, that was pretty far from
Okay.
it. Yeah. We'll move on down the road, Charlie. I want to know about the origin of your relationship with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and does it start with this guy and the idea of perhaps becoming a badass muse of the indomitable Mr. Guy Ritchie, or is it just sort of a health and fitness thing? Where did it all come from, and what's your relationship with it now?
Yep, I think it did come from Guy and his right-hand man, Ivan, that are both avid practitioners of jiu-jitsu. Also Purple, who is Simon Hayes?
Purple Haze,
Yeah, Purple Haze, right, Simon Hayes, yeah.
He's our sound man, he just happens to be called Purple Haze.
Yeah, who is also, was the sound man on King Arthur, was talking a lot about jiu-jitsu. So I got interested, went and had a bit of a roll around, and thought it was terrible fun, and continued on my own. It's a tough thing. I was in India. I was doing very well this year. I was, going 4 or 5 times a week, and, getting pretty tasty again. I'd gotten tasty, and then I took a little break from it, and then I was getting tasty again, and then went to India for 5 months, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity to get my jiu-jitsu on. So, I do it when I can. I'm not sure if it's an attempt to be Guy Ritchie's muse necessarily, but I figure maybe I already am. I don't know, without the jiu-jitsu. I mean, we're 2 films in, so there's something of a relationship there.
So Hugh, I'm not going to ask you about weed or jiu-jitsu. I mean, I can. If you have anything to add to that subject, you're welcome to sort of improv on those lines. So in thinking about this moment right here, right now, this Q&A, I decided to go ahead and reacquaint myself with your entire career. And I didn't watch all the movies, but I watched every single trailer from every single film. And when I was younger in the 90s, there was this Hugh Grant persona, right? It was the sort of incredibly handsome, but maybe a little bit nervous, maybe sometimes stuttering, but damn charming individual. And then I contrasted it to where you are in the Guy Ritchie universe, and it feels like you've moved in a parallel path into sort of this seasoned Michael Caine-esque, like, really salty individual that is very alien from the Hugh Grant of the 90s. Which do you like better?
I am more comfortable being revolting, to be honest. All actors are, and I don't really know why, except that the camera seems to sort of eat it up. It's a weird thing. The camera loves. It can pick up truth, and I think that the nasty truth about human beings is that we are revolting, and that niceness is just a tiny thin veneer on top.
And it's very difficult to be interesting for the camera if you're playing a nice guy. You've had to play nice guys. It's not easy, is it? Yeah, much easier to be vile.
I like that answer.
I like that answer too.
And I gotta say, this is my own personal opinion. I love Four Weddings and a Funeral, Hugh Grant. I really do. I've been with you your whole career. I don't love it quite as much as what you just portrayed on screen. I like vile Hugh Grant. So kudos.
Four Weddings would have been very interesting if Fletcher had been.
He would have just messed up further the whole show. Anyway, but Michelle, so full disclosure, my wife Carrie is here, and she gave me a list of about 20 Downton Abbey questions that she wanted me to ask, but I didn't think it was necessarily appropriate. So I've wedged in a partial Downton Abbey, if it's okay. And again, same rules apply.
I like Downton Abbey, so crack on.
So the question, and I apologize if I'm being too long-winded about this, but there's some context to set up. Peter Lorre was plagued with his whole life of being conflated with his on-screen persona, and people would see him in the street and spit at him, and not that Lady Mary is at all bad, but she can be a little bit high-spirited at times.
Yeah.
But does it happen to you, and do you worry about that in success of being spit upon? It's not a good. Now that I say it, it's not a good question. So you can sort of extrapolate that.
No, I mean, there is part of that I understand. You know, playing someone like Mary, particularly in those, episodes where she was vile to her sister and other characters, and I have had people, react to me in a certain way when they meet me. I once had this woman in a theatre who turned to me and said, "Oh, you're a bitch, aren't you?"
Should be nice to your sister.
So yeah, I certainly, have had some reactions like that. I mean, I think, people sort of assume that like characters that you become, that you play, you may be very much like them, which I'm, nothing like her, which I think came as a bit of a surprise to Guy when considering me for this role. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I definitely relate to.
And I adore the character in this film, because there's a little bit of a turn, right? Because there's biases and stereotypes that come played in the front, but then you turn out to be, quite wonderful and a great partner to this particular gentleman here. And that's not the question. The question is for both of you. That's such a badass business. Does that business exist? Or is that out of your straight? I'm going back to the same old goddamn question. But
No, the business exists.
that is okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a perfectly acceptable answer. I feel like I might be getting repetitive, and people might need to shut me off. We might go to the questions from the audience here a second. But Henry, two of your biggest successes have been from the most charming human being, the heartthrob, but in this movie you are a complete asshole.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to Hughes a little bit. That's an exciting move. In the future, in your career, are you going to be a heartthrob, or are you going to be an asshole?
Can we have a bit of both?
You can have both. You can have both.
Can we have a bit of both?
Where does your heart guide you?
My heart, guys. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't enjoy every minute of waxing lyrical on Guy's set, on saying the C-bombs and the F-bombs and stepping into shoes that aren't necessarily ours. And I think that's the greatest joy as an actor, is you get to live out those fantasies that aren't perhaps socially sort of accepted or correct. And to be honest, for me, it was the winning thought really was heading down to the pub and telling my mates that I was in a Guy Ritchie film. We grew up with Guy's films, with Snatch and Lock, Stock, and to be able to portray one of those like iconically horrid characters, it was amazing. So if we can pepper the career with some wonderful characters and you know, and step into Hugh's shoes once in a while and really become a horrid sort of character, that'd be brilliant.
Nice. So we're going to open up the questions to the audience, and I will give us all the power. If the question's just kind of lame, then we're going to go on to the next question, right? We don't have to answer any lame question, except for the ones that have already been asked, and those are like a piece of history at this point. So does anybody have any questions for anybody in the audience? And so bear with me, because there's 13 other cities that are with us tonight. So after you ask your questions, and I was not pointing at you, sir, because giving you the idea that you're going to be the first question. I'm willfully not going to choose you now. But I'm going to repeat the question, and then we'll decide as a democratic forum if it's worthy of answering, and then we'll maybe answer it. Okay. Only awesome questions here. You, sir, in the red shirt. I'm sorry, you're next. Yeah.
Oh, crap. Oh, hey.
Oh, I don't have to repeat the question. Look at this.
Cool.
There's a microphone. We got all high tech all of a sudden. All right.
It's got so much more nerve-wracking. Soundtracks are so important in all your films, and especially this one. I mean, the Roxy Music song and all that is in there. Is there ever a point where, is it more that you hear a song sometimes and you conceive of a scene, or you write the scenes and then always go back later and find a song? What's the balance there?
I think it's a bit of both. But earlier on, I was trying to explain that there's a rhythm. It's an interesting thing, and it's kind of an unconscious thing, and it's only in retrospect or someone else points it out. But there's a rhythm to the dialogue, and then you find there's a rhythm to the music. And if you know, in something as conspicuously as we've chosen a particular tone to this film, and that is rhythmical, and so the dialogue moves to a rhythm, and then the music moves to a rhythm. And what happens is in the edit, you think, oh, I fancied that tune, and actually it doesn't work that well. So then you stick on another track, and then in the end, what you're really after is this oscillating rhythm. And there are those nostalgic tunes that you're familiar with, the Roxy Music tune. Which, by the way, how great is that tune? You know, and who knew Roxy Music came up with that? It's rather fabulous. So you dig through stuff, really looking for a rhythm.
All right. It is funny because you asked that question, and then there were murmurs throughout the audience of like, I wanted to ask that question. So good question. You get the, so far, question of the day. All right, the guy that I'm sort of made fun of for being the first question. All right, you get the second question.
Great film. So my question is kind of for Hugh and for Guy. Fletcher was kind of like telling the story or narrating the story in a way. Was there a difference, or was it different for you acting when you're kind of narrating the story or directing him versus the other actors and characters in the film?
It's quite an interesting question, because in part Hugh's role grew during the construction of the narrative, and that's informed by Hugh's ownership and possession of the role. And because he found his way into that, I just thought, hold on, this has got to be a bigger role, because it was smaller than that, and it was really him and his, as I say, his ownership of it that went, oh, we need to flush this out. I'll let you carry on from there, Hugh.
Yes, well, that may be true. That's very nice. What I remember is that I learned 40 fucking pages of dialogue, which took me, I'm old now, it took me weeks and weeks and weeks. But I had it absolutely in my head, turned up on the first day, and Guy Ritchie said, no, we're not doing any of that, here's some new pages. And I said, I can't learn a new stuff now.
That's not exactly how you said it, actually, Hugh.
No, it was tenser than that. The guy said, "Don't worry, we've got a teleprompter." I said, "Teleprompter? I'm not a newsreader, darling. I'm an actor." So there was a little standoff there. But I was a functionary as well. I helped to sort of stitch things together. Even in post-production, I came back and put some sticking plasters between bits, didn't I? Yeah.
Yeah, but again, it's because Hugh's momentum amounted to such a force that that character, and it's curious, isn't it, how repulsive he is and how attractive he is in sort of equal measure, but that's to do with a combination, I suppose, of the director and the actor, but in no small part because of the actor.
It kind of draws me back to the cerebral question, Matthew. Weed? No, the other one. That was the other question. It's just the we're talking about the rhythm of a Guy Ritchie film, right? And it's not like it's a playbook, but there's a very distinct style, and I think it's partially driven by the music, but it's also driven by the dialogue and the cadence